Hi, everybody, and welcome to Nonfiction Kidlit Craft Conversations. My name is Kirsten Larson. I'm the author of The Fire of Stars, illustrated by Catherine Roy, and also the craft book Reimagining Your Nonfiction Picture Book. The goal of Kidlit Craft Conversations is to connect with authors of brand new picture books and other nonfiction to discuss a single aspect of the writing craft. So today I'm joined by Nell Cross Beckerman, author of the NCTE Orbis Pictus Honor Book, Caves, illustrated by Kalen Chock. Today, we are discussing her latest book in the series, Volcanoes. Sorry, I'm trying to get it in there. So today we are discussing Volcanoes, which just came out August 6th, 2024 with Orchard Books, and that is also illustrated by Kalen Chock. So welcome, Nell.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be part of your ever expanding empire of helping kids, book writers who want to write nonfiction. It's awesome and exciting. Thank you.
Well, and I thank you for being such an inspiration to many of us. There are so many craft elements we could talk about with this book series, but I know writing in series is really interesting to a lot of authors. So I thought we would start by kind of jumping back in time and talking a little bit about your first book, Caves, which became the first book in this series. So, how did the idea for Caves come about?
Okay. So Caves came out in 2022, and the idea for it, well, I was sitting on the screened porch of a rental house on Alligator Point, Florida, where my family gathers every year in a big family reunion. And I was trying to think of, okay, well, what should we do today? Because, we have a week, we have the same week every summer, we have our same activities. Okay, what are we going to do? And I was like, gosh, I know that there are like some limestone caves around here because I'd gone to them before I'd brought my kids. And I was like, I wonder if my kids could survive the 2-hour drive to the cave. And then I was like, oh my gosh, my kids have never been in a cave before. And it just like it horrified me because I grew up going to limestone caves and seeing the stalactites and stalagmites. And I kind of assumed that was just part of childhood. And since this book has come out, I realized it's not. And my kids hadn't gone to one. And so all my memories of going to caves and just the mood and the vibe and the mystery all came rushing at me at once. And I pulled out my phone and on my notes app, I wrote the first draft of Caves. And I felt so excited about it that I even took a picture of my feet kind of resting on the screen porch to just kind of remember that moment and how fun and exciting it was. So that's the inspiration for Caves.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, it's pretty unusual that you just get an entire download of a book into your brain all at once. But I think for me, reading Caves, that's really what your book tapped into was that mystery and wonder. You just did such an excellent job of capturing the emotion of exploring a cave. So it's definitely one of my all-time faves. So,
Thanks. Well, if I can nerd out for 1 second,
oh,
because I know
please do.
your audience is into craft. And one of the things I was so excited about with Caves is I could just tell that it would be so fun as a picture book because of the page turns. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great because it'll be like as you're creeping around and you discover things in a cave, like all of a sudden a big chamber opens up. Well, that's what a page turn does, right? So I really tried to work that in where it's like, oh, you don't see what's happening, seeping through the earth, water drip, drip, dripping. And then it's like, whoa. So I really tried to emulate the feeling of caving with the page turns for this book.
That is really awesome. I never would have thought about explaining it that way, but that's so cool. I love that. I love that. So you have Caves. It's very successful. You got an NCTE honor. Was that 2022? I'm trying to remember. It was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it came out in fall of 2022 and it happened like, yeah, I guess it came out in October and November was NCTE when it won that award, which was a shock. Like someone saw a post on Twitter and emailed me and was like, I think this is a thing. It's like,
That,
what? Oh my God.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you had never envisioned this as a series. You did not pitch this as a series. Is that correct? Or
Well,
did you?
well, I did not pitch it as a series, but when my agent subbed it, first of all, I want to tell everyone watching that everyone said no. No, 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 no. Pass, 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 except for one person, Katie Height at Scholastic Orchard, who said, I love it. And we think this could be a series, so that's something I want everyone watching to absorb is that, it just has to connect with the right person. So I did not write it thinking it would be a series. My previous editors for Den Under the Pier and for When the Sky Glows both passed on it. And so my agent kind of set it out more widely. And yeah, so as I said, Katie came back with bells on saying, we think this has potential to be award winning and be a series. And I was like dizzy, it was overwhelming and very exciting. So it was their idea for a series. So before she actually made her offer, she said, if this was a series, could you like write up a little proposal for a series? So that was really fun. I researched all kinds of things, and I knew I wanted it to be a series it had to just set itself apart in some way. Um, in some of the other series I was inspired by is like Stacey McAnulty. How do you say her last name? McAnulty? Um,
I think it's McAnulty.
McAnulty. Her like Universe series, I was inspired by. Kate Messner's Over Under series, very inspired by. Um, and then there's also smaller series that I've discovered since then, like Maria Gianfieri has a series that are about predators, like bobcat prowling, hawk rising. I'm
Coyote Moon,
forgetting
I
the other
think.
one.
Coyote
Coyote
Moon.
Moon. Yeah, Coyote Moon. I love that series. So I really thought about other people's series and how to make this one different. So I I made a little pitch of topics so caves I think covers around 8 different caves all over the world. Um, and so for each subject, I just tried to research 8 possible, um, you know, features globally for each subject. And I made a little Pinterest board just with images for each one. Because I'm very visual. I'm a former documentary TV producer. So I'm definitely thinking of visuals when I create. So yeah, I really thought having like a mood board kind of for each topic would help. And so we sent that in and they said great. They didn't say at the time, great. And the next one will be this topic. And then the third will be this topic. It was just like, great. Okay, glad to see you have ideas. And then they gave me the offer for one just for caves.
Oh, interesting. So even though they envisioned it as a series, they were still kind of like, let's see how this goes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So
And so
did you move into the next book then? Did you start working on the next book, be Volcanoes, before Caves came out? Okay.
yes. Yeah. So I was very curious. I was thinking before we started having our talk, I'm like, it's a little bit like you meet a boy or you meet a girl, or, in my case, you would meet a boy and they say, I like you and I think I want to marry you someday. And it's like, okay, is that now?
Is that in 10 years? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a little bit how I felt with the series. I was like, should we talk about the next one? Should we talk about the next step in our relationship? um, so I tried to, hold myself back and kind of, I was like, do you think now? Like, when do you think we start thinking about it? And Katie is an amazing, amazing editor, so patient and so encouraging. And she said, well, something about Scholastic is all their titles have to be approved by so many different parts, like the marketing and the books and fairs, the fairs and clubs, and there's just a lot. It's not like some publishers where one person can just say yes. So, so I don't know why they decided to start. It was time to start thinking about the next one when they did. I was not privy to the information that happened, but so that was. I sold Caves in early 2020. It was scheduled for fall of 2022. And I was looking back on my emails. And so I sold Volcanoes in early 2021. So about 9 months before Caves came out. And it took a while to, it was a little bit feeling around the dark for what the subject was going to be. Um, I think we were both trying to, I was like, well, what would you guys be excited about? Because I want to write that, And I think they were like, well, what would you be excited to write about? Because that's what we want to publish. So we kind of ended up on volcanoes, which I was very happy about. We discussed possibly glaciers, which I felt like it's an important subject, but it wasn't grabbing my heart really. And I found when I went to the library, it was interesting. All the glacier books were shelved right next to the volcano books. And as I was pulling glacier books out of the kids section, I also just was grabbing volcano books just because I was like, ooh, volcanoes, that sounds fun. And my hand was just grabbing them. And then after some further discussion with Katie, she was like, marketing wants a book about volcanoes. I was like, perfect. So, so I started writing it, and I think I sent my first draft in like September of 2021, and she offered in like February of 2021. So that was before Caves came out. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So, how close, like when you were discussing your ideas for volcanoes, how
Mhm.
close were those ideas to those kind of mini proposals that you had originally put together? Where
Oh my
you
gosh.
had created that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, I'm just curious, was there, was that sort of, did you ever go back to that document, or was it almost like starting over, Did you even
I-
look at the Pinterest board?
I'm gonna expose how somewhat disorganized I am in that, I did all that work for the original proposal, and then it's almost like I had amnesia about it. And I started researching volcanoes, and then I was like, oh yeah. In fact, and I was like, duh, like half the things I'd rediscovered that I already put on the first one. But I will say volcanoes is a little bit different than caves because Caves has one cave that is about kind of caves in general, meaning what I call stalactites and stalagmites, but then it goes into very specific caves around the world. It has the glowworm grotto in New Zealand. It has prehistoric cave art with that Lascaux cave. It has fossils. It has the Homo naledi fossils discovered in the Rising Star Cave. So it's these very, very particular things. And with volcanoes, I did more of a thing where I wanted to hook the the kids in right away with the same dramatic what's going to happen, but at this time instead of what's like what are you going to see in the cave, it's like when is the volcano going to erupt? Oh my gosh. So, we start with like this very dramatic like what is coming? We're feeling rumbling and trembling and when's it going to pop, and so then we talk a little bit more about, so this was inspired by my own experience of seeing a live eruption in Kilauea, and how I was aiming towards where I saw a big flow of lava that we were allowed to go close to, and I didn't realize that literally right under my feet there were cracks glowing with red lava. And so I was really trying to bring that experience into volcanoes. And then, but we do cover specific volcanoes and volcanoes, but we also just cover like scientists and, volcanologists, and also plate tectonics, and, the ring of fire, and the volcanoes make islands, and, but then we also go to like Krakatoa and tsunamis. So it was a little bit of a different beast than caves because I was trying to both educate about volcanoes, but not get too granular about it because there are so many nonfiction books for kids that really do a great job explaining the science of volcanic eruptions and the magma. Da, da, da. And I didn't want this book to be that. I wanted it to be more of a wild ride, but also just finding the most high interest volcanoes, like going to outer space, and that there's volcanoes that erupt ice, and that at the bottom of the ocean, there's animals that they didn't even know exist that only exist because of the heat of underwater volcanoes. Um, so your original question was, did I go back to that original list? I don't think I knew for volcanoes that we'd cover more of like just the overarching general science of volcanoes when I did the original list.
But it's interesting because in some ways it's almost like this idea of putting a draft in the drawer and then rewriting it from a blank page, and you kind of see what from your
Yeah.
original ideas bubbles up. I mean, it's sort of a similar process. You wrote this proposal,
Mhm.
you had ideas, you let them sit, and then you started from scratch, and the ideas that were the same were probably the good ideas.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So
That's a good point.
it's an interesting process.
Yeah.
Um, so and that's another interesting question is, how much consistency is there across titles? Because you have another book announced in the series, Forests.
Mhm.
You have the same illustrator, so they have like a similar visual point of view. How how is the content in Forests? Are you more locationally focused, with different types of forests, or are you kind of looking at broader concepts the way that you did in Volcanoes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I should have reviewed the manuscript before our conversation to refresh my
This
memory.
is what I love about writing nonfiction. It's like the minute we're done, you got to empty your brain and move on to the next thing.
No, I know. It's like I've written two full other books about completely different subjects since that one. So I'm like, wait, what are we talking about
Yeah,
again?
what did I write about? I don't even know.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so forests, I I'm super, I'm excited about forests because okay, so you asked about what are the things which we're trying to keep across the series. So for me, at top of list is making sure it feels dramatic and exciting. I want these books to almost function as like a field trip, but field trip to all around the whole world. So it's half armchair traveler, half, oh my gosh, if you want to grow up to be an expert who gets to go to these, inaccessible places, this is what could be in store for you. Or it can just be bringing it back to where you live. Like in forests, I made sure, like, let's talk about urban forests. Let's talk about the forest that's, in your backyard if you live in a city. So, but we also go to, the crooked forest in Poland, which I don't know. So I'm wanting to make it very sensory, global, interactive, dramatic, whatever seems like it's the most high interest for kids that goes at the top of my priority list. And then, trying to figure out, okay, well, how can we also drip in a layer of education that could help sort of I don't come from an education background, so I'm always a little bit feeling in the dark as to how could this help support teachers. And to be honest, that's not my number one priority. My number one priority is getting kids excited about the world and reading and how you can do both of those things in these books. I feel like, the more we can get kids amped up about going out to experience the world, the more they'll care about the world and what happens to the world. And there's lots of authors who can then catch them to figure out, okay, now that you care about the world, here's what you can do. But I see my job is like, let's have fun in the world. Let's see what all the amazing things there are in the world. So, okay, that was my long answer for that. Make it global. I also really try to write so you feel like you are there. Like I love what Kalen did with this illustration where it's like you're looking down, you know, you're looking down at the feet. It's like you're right there with us. So just inclusive, like, yes, we're going to these places. Um, and and also just working those page turns to make it feel even more like an adventure. So those are the elements I'm trying to do in the book. And yeah, and definitely as I'm thinking of other topics, just what are things that exist all over the world that we can bring together in a collection.
Very cool. So you have forests, and I know obviously we can't talk about books that are not under contract, but are there any signs that maybe the series is going to continue? Maybe?
You know, I I I think so. It's basically this. I feel the same as it did for each one, where it's like I think with Scholastic they really want to see how the book performs. So everyone watching, please go buy Volcanoes. um, but uh, but yeah, I think they're not they but for all these they haven't said where's the next one we want it's been me saying like are you ready for the next one, should we think about the next one, and then it's like yeah, can you write it in like 2 months? And I'm like so we have talked about what could be the next, and I think we're all excited about the topic. It's forests have been covered by just a few other authors.
Trees
um,
have been very popular the last few
yes.
years.
Yes, I really tried hard to make this book different from what's out there. I feel like it's not the same thing you've seen before. I did do one spread about those mycorrhizal networks I can't pronounce, all those fungal networks, and about wildfires as well. But I feel like we picked some forests that it's a very big breadth of topic. But the next subject is not one that I've seen covered a lot. So actually, I had two in mind that I kind of was bouncing off of my editor, and she was pretty non-committal about both. She's like, "Yeah, that's cool, that's cool," So I have to say, like, she gives me a lot of room to dream and research and decide what sounds exciting to me. Um, but I think she's leaning towards one direction. And then at ALA, I saw more Scholastic people, and I kind of floated the idea to them, and their faces lit up too. So I was like, okay, I think that's the one. But I
Well,
don't know. I don't know if there's going to be a fourth. So who knows?
I mean, we can't know anything, but we can hope. But
Yeah,
I do think it's so interesting that at the end of the day, she's interested in what excites you, because that excitement is what comes across on the page and reaches readers and gets them excited about reading your book.
it's true. And I'll tell you, when she first was interested in the original manuscript for Caves, my agent set up a call, and I started, she wants to know what inspired me to write the book. And I started babbling all about, the story I have told you all. And she said, hearing your passion makes me feel even more excited about this book and more like sure that this is a book I want to acquire. So that's something I've always thought, like I've taken to heart, is that the author's passion is something that she, you know, is it's important for her. So that's cool, right?
That's awesome to have a partner like that.
Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah. The whole team at Scholastic is outstanding and amazing. Dream.
So, in general, what would you say are like the most challenging and most rewarding parts of writing in a series?
That's a good question. The challenging is that I'm not used to kind of picking an idea and then writing about it. I'm used to like the classic inspiration of like being out on a hike and a bunny runs by and it's like, oh, city bunnies, like just having organic ideas come to me. Um, and so I had to really shift gears to be like, okay, now we're writing about volcanoes. Okay, now and it's a different feeling for me. And the challenge is the challenge has been Caves was so well received that I felt a little bit of pressure of to how do we match this amazing reception that this book got? So having that pressure is, I think, one of the challenges. But one of the advantages is, people are know about your first book, so it makes them kind of naturally interested in, well, what's the next one? So it feels like we should have this kind of built-in readership. I guess it remains to be seen if that's true or not. It's also just nice to know kind of what we're doing, like what the style is and all that. Yeah, it's nice. I mean, it's a comfort to know that there's a possible future. I think we all might feel like the last book we sold could be the last book we sold, so it just feels like, oh, there's a little bit more possibility if there's a series. Also, I think of you, Kirsten, a lot as I've seen you post this a million times. Front list sells backlist. And I've found that like that feels, I mean, just in general, as I publish more books, I see that play out that people come to an event for a new book and then they end up picking up copies of, books that have published a few years ago. So that feels like it could be even more true for a series that when they discover one, maybe they'll get the one that came before it.
Yeah. So do you have any advice or that you might offer to people who are interested in branching out into series?
I was thinking about this question and I don't have any advice. I would love all my books to be series, like for Park to Playa, let's do a series about hikes in different cities. I have all the hikes all ready for you, for When the Sky Glows, like let's do a whole series about skies, And I try to make those things happen, As you've heard from earlier, they came to the table with the idea of making this a series. So I think, I don't have any advice. I think it's luck. This is my take on it.
And then when they say, "Would you like to turn this book into a series?" you say yes, and
Oh
then
yeah.
you figure it out.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Always, yes, always.
All right. Well, Nell, I really appreciate it. So, where can people connect with you and buy your fabulous new book?
Yeah, oh, thank you. Well, my website is nellcrossbeckerman.com. And I've started to do a few writing classes that are recorded, and so they're up there on my website, and they're reasonably priced if you're interested in writing lyrical nature stuff. And then I'm most active on Instagram. I'm trying to get into Blue Sky, so I post a little bit there. I'm a little bit on Twitter. I'm a little bit on Facebook. But yeah, my website, I have a newsletter, which I almost never send out. But if you are interested in future classes, the newsletter is a great way to find out about them. And Volcanoes is, available everywhere. If you want signed copies, my local indie children's book world does sign copies of all my books. That's on my website. And yeah.
All right. And we will put links to all of that in the notes. So I really appreciate it, Nell. And again, like I love this book so much. It really does give you the sense of being there, especially in those dramatic first few spreads. The minute by minute action is really intense. So I highly recommend it. And I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate everything you do for all of us. We're all learning so much from you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.